The third and last tool we can use to measure this are the very detailed analytics reports I can get from my YouTube studio. But these are skewed towards English-speaking places and my specific channel. This isn't representative of the world. That when you have a smaller sample size, it's less accurate. That those reports for how much was Season 8 mentioned as a hashtag across all of Twitter across the globe in Season 8 is a hell of a lot more accurate than the smaller sample size of my individual YouTube channel. I'm not even one of the big ones. And even the big ones I wouldn't think were very accurate. But what can we see from my YouTube analytics, mentally acknowledging there's a big break between this and the other two, that this is skewed? Well, for me, the top 5 countries have consistently been the United States, then the UK, then Germany, Canada, and Australia. And I've asked around other YouTube channels over the years. They said, yeah, those are also consistently our top 5 because we're making content in English. Now, you notice all these are English-speaking countries except Germany, but Germany has such a big economy and so much of it is online, so many people have web stuff, that even the sub-fraction of people from Germany who know English is and are writing in it online is big enough to rank as number 3. That if there's 10 million German people watching Game of Thrones online, and only 5 million of those can know enough English to watch my videos, 5 million would still put them at number 3. The sub-fraction of Germans I'm dealing with. But that makes sense. They're a really big economy. When you look at lists of how many websites are made in which languages for which country, that no surprise, Germany is a big online presence. We know that in general from other internet analytics. So I've taken to referring to these as the Big 5, because every other YouTube channel said, yeah, these are consistently our top ones. You know, the Big 5, like the Big 3 at the Yalta conference. And this varies from year to year, but generally, United States usually has, when they give you YouTube analytics, they give it as a percentage of your total viewership. United States is usually hovering around 40%, like 37% to 42%. The UK, between 10, 14, 12%-ish. It's the only other one that gets double digits. And like maybe a quarter of what I'm getting from the United States. Germany and Canada are actually pretty much neck and neck. That if I had to list this, I'd say 3 and 4. That some days, some months, when you measure it across a scale of months, it's more accurate. They're roughly even, Germany and Canada. That they're usually hovering around anywhere between up to 5% to down to 3%, 4%-ish in that region. It varies for each one, but Germany and Canada are roughly the same number on my channel. That the sub-fraction of Germans who come online and watch English content is as big as everyone from Canada who comes online and watches English content. Australia does well, it's in the top 5, but it's always consistently in 5th place. That it never really rises up to challenge the other two. That it's usually around 3.3 to 3.8%-ish. That's usually a full percentage point below the other ones. Those are the top 5. And I've seen this. I've been doing this for 5 years. After that, there's a big drop-off from the top 5. It's like there's a plateau from rank number 6 through number 15. That it's things that are roughly a full percentage point, almost approaching 2%. They're never 2%. These are things that are like 0.5% to almost 2%. But noticeable. Anything nearly 1% I consider significant. Particularly because once you go past number 15, there's another steep drop-off to the point where it's negligible. It's nothing. It's 0.3%, 0.1%. That I don't do top 10 on here. I do top 15 because 15, there's a drop-off. Below that's not worth knowing. And the things 15 and up are notable and shift around. I'm not going to waste time reading off this whole table here, but I made a table of, okay, it changed over time. There was a demographic shift. How do I illustrate this? I have figures for the first year I did my channel during Season 7 in 2017. Then January to December of 2019, which is the lead up to Season 8, and its aftermath. And then, obviously things were a little slow during the off years, but I said, let's say from the first teaser trailer for House of the Dragon, which came out on October 5th, to today, to now, present day. Because there was a big spike in, people looking up this content once a first teaser comes out for something. Now, when I started, the rank order was, US, UK, Germany, Canada, Australia, then Sweden, Netherlands, Poland, Norway, Brazil. That was the top 10. Brazil was number 10. And then Ireland, and then India at number 12, Finland, France, Denmark. So I made videos about this at the time. I was talking about, it's so cool, I get analytics. I said my channel is the top 5 I already listed. Then I said, outside of English-speaking countries, where are people watching my stuff? I said, Germany, Netherlands, Scandinavia, Brazil, and Poland were what I thought were the major parts of the fandom, and maybe were at the time 5 years ago. But this was right before, this is the cusp of when they started heavily expanding into other parts of the world, when they actually gave a good streaming service to Brazil, when they made a big push in Southeast Asia. Same year, India also, the third thing that happened that year was India got it on Hotstar. And this didn't take effect yet. In an earlier version of this video, I went month by month, that you can see when it happened. It was October of 2017, like a switch going off. Suddenly there was a big surge in people watching from India. But because this is on a scale of a year, that gets obscured a bit, that you see it rising in the other parts of the world starting in 2018. But I'm setting a baseline for this. It's a delayed reaction of, this was a snapshot of right before those other regions started getting it, early 2017-ish, then as everything else moved around. And you see the after effects by 2019, which continued through to today. Well, what are those major trends that we've seen yet? Again, read the table. Pause this. I'm not going to read off every percentage point. These are just the trends I'm going through. First one is what I call the rise of India. India tripled in its percentage points on my channel. It has overtaken Australia and broken into the top 5. Right now, it varies from one month to the next. It has, by a fraction of a percentage point, overtaken Germany by 0.2%. But that varies week to week. Some weeks Germany's on top, some days India is. Occasionally, India is doing better than Canada. Remember how I said before, Germany and Canada were kind of neck and neck? It's now sort of a three-way race between Canada, Germany, and India. Problem is, Canada and Germany are not growing in proportion, whereas India is. So we can safely predict that these trends will continue. That it's a matter of when, not if, India overtakes Germany and Canada by a full percentage point to be the top 3 country on my channel. So let's look at that, but going through rank, I'm not going to go through percentage points too much, focus more on the rank stuff. 2017, India was in 12th place, 1.2% of my viewership. By 2019, with Season 8, it had gone from 12th place to number 6, 2.0. And since House of the Dragon's teaser came out last October, it went up to number 4 with 3.3%. Generally, the rank order for countries as a whole doesn't change that much. It's these one or two outliers that are rising through the ranks. It's not that Germany went down, it's that India rose. That Germany and Australia are still relative to each other, they didn't change. It's India that changed. And the same for the other things on the list. that Brazil and Poland didn't suddenly drop drastically in rank so much as other things outpaced them. Well, the big thing is the rise of India. To a lesser extent, and somewhat mirroring that, is the rise of the Philippines, which is also, very shocking. That when I started, the Philippines were very low. They were in 21st place, 0.6%. Then they went up to 17th place by 2019. Now they've broken into the top 10. They are in 9th place now with 1.1%. And I realize I'm talking about half a percentage point here. All of the big countries like UK, Canada, and Germany have not been experiencing growth as a proportion, which leads to my next big section, the decline of Northern Europe. That when I started 2017, I thought, wow, the big countries in this are Germany and Sweden. What really happened, I'm going to give you the conclusion up front here, we hit the saturation point on those countries a long time ago, that anyone who could be watching is watching. That's good, but it means they're not growth regions. And I didn't understand that at the time, that it's everyone in there who could be is, if you took all 4 Scandinavian countries as a whole, if you added them up, in 2017 they would have been the 3rd largest country. By 2019, collectively, Scandinavia would be the 5th largest, and by today, last 6 months, it would be the 7th largest. But you see this decline with all of them. Sweden went from 6 to 8 to 10. Norway went from 8th place to 15th place to 18th place. Like, South Africa is doing better than Norway now. Mexico. So, I don't think that's a problem, and they got HBO Max. They got everything else. The issue is they were one of the first places to get an international version of HBO Go. That HBO Nordic was actually a really well-maintained international version of HBO long before all the other big launches in 2017. So they were the early leader of the pack. It's that everyone else caught up. That it's evened out. Reminds me of that whole book thing, that economist's book about the Earth is flat. That it's not that the United States is doing bad, it's like every other country is just improving. It's not like, oh, well, it's the third world. It's, well, India's doing better than it used to do. So, because the world is flat, there aren't peaks and valleys anymore. Or increasingly, I know it's still an economics thing. So the problem is these were early adopters for Game of Thrones, like Germany, Scandinavia. They hit the saturation point a long time ago. United States is also, holding even or losing viewership slightly, but the UK maxed out a really long time ago. Germany. On the other hand, we are seeing, it's not a Europe versus Asia thing. I mean, even Southern Europe, Southwestern Europe has been increasing slightly. I mean, like Spain went from 16th place to 13th place to 12th place. Spain has been increasing. Portugal was ranked number 32 when I started this. 2019, it was up to 19th place. Now it's 17th. And this is fractions of a percent, but, relative to the other ones. Italy, improving marginally. Another one, but the one that surprised me the most was France. France has been doing respectably. That when I started, France was in 14th place. Now they're in 8th place. They broke into the top 10. That's a difference between 1.0 or 1.5%, but when you see all of the other countries around it, like the UK and Germany, falling behind from major European economies, I think it's just because France didn't have a very good streaming service at the time. They used this Orange Cinema series thing. They don't have Sky Atlantic. So it makes sense that the big places that had deals in place since season 1, like Sky Atlantic or HBO Nordic, were the places that maxed out first, that hit the saturation point first. Then we get to Latin America. Brazil has been doing respectably on my channel, but here we run into the language barrier. That, like, kept saying, well, Germany, it's the fraction of Germans who speak English. There is a big, and we need to prioritize this, there is a big language barrier that I don't put out subtitles in Portuguese. That even the sub-fraction of Brazilians, the number 2 country discussing this on Twitter and Instagram, the sub-fraction of Brazilians who go online and know enough English to watch my videos in English is still enough to be in the top 10, because Brazil is just that big. During the run of Game of Thrones, they were sort of the trendsetter because they were 10th place in Season 7 and also 10th place in Season 8. Both years they were 1.3%. So that's like you're the trendsetter at the race. And it has been increasing, that it went up to 7th place, up to 1.7%. So I'm seeing that increase, and I think part of this might be, and again, I threw out the hour-long version of this, no one would watch it. I think Brazil probably got a really big boost from the HBO Max launch last June of 2021. That this is measuring from October 2021 onwards. I remember that when I was going through this month by month, and this took too long, so I cut it out, you can see a boost in viewership from Brazil once people were watching Game of Thrones on HBO Max there. That it leads to another boom in viewership for everyone in the YouTube community who's discussing it. As for the rest of Latin America, it's not nearly as big. That the only other big ones that are in the top 50 on my channel are Mexico and Argentina. Mexico's doing okay. Hovers around 0.5%. Rank-wise, went from 26th place to 18th to 19th in that region, in the top 20. It's not that big, though, that it's spread out across all of Spanish-speaking Latin America, that the big thing is Brazil. And, in terms of where should we hold a Comic-Con, there is, fan events in Mexico City and stuff, but if I were to pick one big event to go to, for the cast and crew to go to in Latin America, just by population density and concentration, they need to send more people to the Sao Paulo Comic-Con, CCXP. They didn't this year because of COVID, I understand that, but, even Game of Thrones actually did recognize that by late in its run. In the lead-up to Season 8, Benioff and Weiss and Maisie Williams and Sophie Turner went to Brazil Comic-Con. So, as these restrictions ease up, one of the big points of this video is HBO needs to keep promoting this at Brazil, but they've actually learned that lesson. You've seen them, this isn't just me ranting, that they're taking Brazil Comic-Con seriously as a major global outlet. I think you're starting to see the trend now when we get to Asia, because all of Southeast Asia actually has the same service provider. That Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand all use the same HBO East Asia thing. But only the Philippines has been increasing in viewership on my channel. That Indonesia, which is huge, is still, it went from 40th place to 30th to 26th now, but it's 3.3%. That's not much. Even Singapore, which might be doing relatively well for its size, because it isn't that big of a population, even so, we're talking something in the bottom 30s in rank on my channel. That it's just not a thing. And I've asked other channels who said, for some reason, Raised by Wolves, the HBO Max show, that was huge in Indonesia and Malaysia. They said we're getting, on our normal Game of Thrones videos, this doesn't happen, but in our top 5, on the videos we make covering Raised by Wolves, Malaysia and Indonesia are in the top 5. It's just really popular in those countries for some reason, in a way that Game of Thrones is not. I don't understand it. So I can't make too much sense of that. Obviously, Hong Kong isn't big enough to get that many people. Japan and Korea, they had a terrible streaming service there. That's the problem, that Japan is not in the top 50 at all. That is the big surprise of, okay, well, it's popular here, and it's not popular in, North Korea, but what surprised me the most, what was the most surprising negative, is that for a G7 top global economy, Game of Thrones is not a thing in Japan. They need a better streaming service. They're starting on that. South Korea, they just announced they're going to expand HBO Max to. They're actively gearing up to spread there. But on the one hand, HBO Max is doing what they should be doing. They should be breaking down doors to spread to South Korea. They are doing that. Us as YouTube channels, we have to wait for HBO to build up that untapped market before we can even consider making YouTube videos that would appeal to an audience from there. But again, you see the trend line. What links all of these? Places where people know English as at least a secondary language. That the rise of India, most people a large number of people in India know English as a second language. Though I asked people from, I was getting all these new viewers from the Philippines, I'd say, well, don't you want it dubbed or something? They said, we all just know English well enough, we don't need a separate thing. And the fact that the Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand are all within the same service, you can't just attribute it to, well, they finally got a good streaming service in the Philippines. They also got a good streaming service in Thailand. They got a well-promoted local language dub. It's the language barrier between me and Thailand. There is no such barrier between me and the Philippines. And there is, to an extent, that barrier in Brazil, that Brazil is that big. And I'm only reaching a fraction. Even the fraction just with pure English content is in my top 10 from number 10 place to number 7. And I'm saying this to all other YouTube channels out there. I want to see what everyone else's analytics are if I could, of the rise of India and the Philippines, because we don't have a language barrier with them. And lastly, remember the legal downloaders for Africa? The Africa was actually breaking into the top legal downloaders by Season 8. South Africa is the top 3 economies in Africa are, in descending order, South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya. I think South Africa wasn't in the top 10 illegal downloaders just because they're a big enough economy, most people can enough people can afford it, that maybe they were number 12 or something. They weren't on the list. Similar to the rise of India, the rise of the Philippines, we have seen a steady rise in viewership from South Africa on my YouTube channel. 2017, South Africa was in 41st place, 0.2%. 2019, it was 31st place, 0.4%. And I also have intervening figures here. I did a separate check. 2020 to late 2021 went up to 0.5%, went up to 19th place. This steady, consistent rise, whereas you see the UK losing 0.3% every 6 months for 5 years. The opposite is true here. And now going from October to present, from when the first House of the Dragon teaser came out to today, it is up to 0.6%, 16th place. Now, granted, I'm talking about fractions of a percent, but this tripled. Started out as 0.2% of my audience, now it's 0.6%. Rank-wise, it went from 41st to number 16. And if that sounds like, I'm just playing around straws here, more people are watching my channel. It's right above Portugal. More people watch my channel from South Africa than from Portugal or Norway or Mexico. And I think we can attribute it to, once again, that I did not consider this when I started my channel in 2017. I thought, wow, it's going to be appealing to either countries where people speak English as a first language like Australia, Canada, or I'll have to get subtitles for things. Well, a lot of places people speak English as a second language. Some places this is due to colonialism, such as South Africa or the Philippines or India. Other places, like Scandinavia and the Netherlands. I've asked repeatedly, and people in my comment section told me, well, in Amsterdam, most people know English. Because we're so focused on international trade that, our schools emphasize it, and we have a big economy, so they're online a lot. High GDP economy means there's a lot of people online. Good education system. Might help that their languages are still Germanic the way English is compared to Chinese or something. But yeah, when I started this in 2017, I half seriously thought, wow, look how many people are watching this from Scandinavia. That if you add up all of Scandinavia for 2017, it would be the 3rd largest country. Maybe I should think about getting Swedish subtitles. But looking at the trend lines, it's if anything, I want Portuguese subtitles to win back the Brazilian audience who I'm not appealing to, that we've hit the saturation point for Northern Europe. For Sky Atlantic countries like Germany and Scandinavia, anyone who would be watching is. Maybe not Germany as much because they don't... Someone explained it to me that they prefer dubs instead of subs. It's a dubs versus subs thing between them and Scandinavia. And English is stressed more in Scandinavia than it is in Germany, where they make you learn classical languages or something like that. So, what conclusions have we reached from all this? We had the two questions of where should HBO Max prioritize spreading, and what should we be focusing on as YouTube channels? Well, from the position of HBO Max, the top ones are Brazil, Philippines, India. These are big growth regions. Also France, but they're getting HBO Max in France at the end of December. They really need to get India. India is the jewel in the crown. If they had even half of what Hotstar gets there as subscribers, it would equal what they're getting in Latin America on HBO Max now. It's as big as Western Europe in terms of subscriber count in India. That is going to be the big surge that you're going to see coming here. Philippines is already on track to get HBO Max because they're part of Southeast Asia there. HBO Max is pretty much covered. Real question is for us. And unlike HBO Max, the conclusion is the internet has no borders, political borders. It has language zones. So I don't need to worry about... I'm talking about the entire Spanish-speaking world, not just one or two countries, because it's all divided up. So it's a rough guess by that. But based on just how popular Brazil was, number 2 on both Twitter and Instagram, the top languages that we should be putting subtitles in are Spanish and Portuguese. After that, German, number 3, just because Germany is so big. And then I would have to say France, in terms of because it's number 4 on Twitter, because it's one of the top downloaders, because even in my YouTube analytics, France is actually growing marginally. That they're holding out, they're being in the top 10 compared to it's declining in other regions. If I had to pick a fifth one, it's a toss-up between Italian and Polish. I would go with Italian. That's another weird thing, that I think Poland was another early adopter, and it's actually declined slightly. I'm sad to say. I'm Polish on my mother's side. I suspect that Poland may have declined a little because The Witcher came out, and it's so popular there because of the Witcher books were made in Polish. So they're a very popular series there. Also possibly because up until recently, Poland didn't have HBO Max. You saw that Brazil actually got a boost again, back up from 10th place to 7th place, once it got HBO Max back in last June. That was 11 months ago. Well, Poland just got HBO Max in the off-season in March. Who's to say what effect this will have on all these, national statistics when we have an active season again? For, big active shows, not, for House of the Dragon, for a channel devoted to Game of Thrones content. I am really excited to see how these rankings will be affected by this time next year. Maybe Poland will get a shot in the arm now that it has HBO Max. But those are the top countries we need to be focusing on. The other thing is, Polish fans told me, it's the dubs versus subs thing, a lot like the Netherlands. We pretty much just know English as a second language. So if I had to list off the 5 languages we should seriously think of ever putting subtitles on our channels for, it's Spanish, Portuguese, German, French, Italian. Those are the top 5 that we should really focus on. That, like Chinese, it wouldn't really affect anything. Japanese wouldn't affect anything. There's no one watching it from there. Like, if you know modern Greek or Romanian, please make your content. That would be a great help if you're from a bilingual background, or if you're in Greece and know this stuff really well. But I myself am not going to be able to learn that many new languages. I took French in high school, and I've been doing classical Latin ever since, because the part of France I look at and the time period I look at in my medieval studies, it's like right before they switched to keeping records in Middle French, so I didn't need to keep knowing French that much. I'm so used to knowing Latin. So I'd have to brush up on my French, but that's better than some of the other stuff that we don't need to seriously think, maybe we should get Hungarian subtitles. That's, guys, and I don't mean this to denigrate everyone, it's in a triage situation. Do you think you'll be able to learn a language? If you do, it has to be a short list of only 5. And these are the 5 that the global fandom more or less speaks. So in my final map here, I've shaded in, this is basically where the online fandom lives. Where are we distributed? Where do we live? Who's communicating with us in English on YouTube? And I shaded in some places with light blue to show, okay, this is English as a second language. Anything from Poland, Scandinavia, Netherlands, through Philippines, India, South Africa. English's primary language is in dark blue. That Portuguese is in red for Portugal and Brazil. I threw in while I was at it, because they're filming in Spain, I put in Spanish while I was at it. I threw in Mexico and Argentina, though you might not really need to, but percentage-wise. But Spanish is a global language, so that's in there. This is basically the countries that watch this show the most and their language zones within the fandom. This isn't a thing in Japan. So what should they be doing? They should be sending more people to conventions in Spain, which shouldn't be that hard because they film in Spain. They should be consistently sending cast members for House of the Dragon to CCXP in Sao Paulo. There is a Comic-Con in Mumbai, India. They should think of having someone drop in for that or something, I don't know. But the key takeaway from all this for me, and just it shocked me that I got so set in my ways thinking of the statistics I saw in 2017. That was right before this major demographic shift. I think a lot of the older guard, the old guard fan site types, really think of this as the way it started in the first 5 seasons, even through season 7, when relatively late in the game there was this big shift in the second half of the show that, when it became a global phenomenon, that means global. That means it's not geographically concentrated in the United States. That there are, fan groups I interact with for House of the Dragon news on a daily basis who live in Greece and Croatia and Portugal and Romania, and there's an Arabic language one who's from the UAE. That this is a global fandom. And I think the earlier fandom, the people that started out as, hey, it's this little show we have in season 1, genuinely thought of it as something that was you could physically have one convention for the entire world. And their experience of the show was, I got to physically go to a convention and hobnob with the actors. This show is so big that that's physically impossible now. To have, there can be cast members coming to events, but it's like a franchise of many convention panels, rather than just one big, this is the convention that we're all going to have. That the fandom has been too Anglo-centric for something that, everyone, it belongs to everyone. We have translation software, that we need that more international outlook for the new era as we move forward through House of the Dragon. And by international, I mean even Europe. I'm talking like Greece and Romania and Spain, even France, have been somewhat overlooked compared to how we considered it exotic when we had cast members going to panels in Germany. Now we need to start thinking about all these other regions, not just, Philippines, Brazil, but even just other parts of Europe that didn't have the show before. I mean, how many times have they really tried to promote it in Poland or anything, even though it's actually pretty popular there? So, what do you guys think of all of this? What have you experienced? And I'm really curious, how will the fandom demographics change a full year from now, after all these HBO Max launches, after House of the Dragon Season 1, which will be heavily scrutinized, everyone will come in to watch that. I don't really think there can be anything more scrutinized than that. 3 years from now, when they're making like a Nymeria show, that will not be as scrutinized as the follow-up to what happens after Game of Thrones Season 8 was so poorly received. But now there's a new show under new people. Can they recapture what the greatness of the early seasons? And after being on break for so many years, I don't think we're ever going to see a 3-year break between content again like this. Just because they're going to start staggering things. I mean, obviously there's going to be off years where House of the Dragon is filming. It takes a long time, but they're going to have other projects to fill in the gap during the gap years. Will we face another 3-year gap again? I really don't think we will. It has been dormant for so long, and how much will things have changed? And the big message of all this is, don't assume it stayed static. That up until like 2 years ago, I kept thinking the international fandom proportions and demographics were what they were in 2017. They're really not anymore. That I've seen people on Twitter like laughing when I say, yeah, I do worry about what fans in South Africa and Nigeria think. Oh yeah, what, all two of them? I know, because I actually get questions from people from there on a consistent basis. They're like, on Twitter, I'm interacting in English with people from the Philippines or South Africa, or using the translation from Brazil. That it's an international fandom, and it's not like, what, you're a lesser fan because you don't live in the middle of the United States. And, I'm one to talk. I live in the New York City area. But it's just weird for me thinking how, because I started out as part of the book fandom, and book fandom is more international because it's slower. You can, send letters and things. Just how much the original old guard fandom was people who liked getting together at conventions in the United States, live. And I'm not knocking people who come for serious academic discussion. I mean, hey, let's go and goof off at San Diego Comic-Con or our own local produced thing, is really the opposite of the more academic international group that's actually worried, has strong opinions about plot points in the Fire and Blood book, versus just, hey, it's Maisie Williams coming to a convention. No, it's a very different character, and we'll see how this shifts as House of the Dragon moves forward. This is a lot of info, but I've been puttering around with trying to make maps of this for a year or so, and I wanted to get it out before House of the Dragon finally launches. What are your thoughts on all of this, on how there's different fandoms and the changing nature of the fandom, and as it spreads globally, and how it used to be very concentrated, and now it's when a show becomes a global hit, it turns into a global fandom. There can't be one single convention anymore. The example I use is the OneRing.net doesn't have one big meetup. They have like a West Coast meetup or an East Coast meetup at different major conventions for Lord of the Rings content. But it's like a global federated model, franchise model. There isn't one single primary meetup anymore, because Tolkien fandom has been around and international for so long, they know it is physically impossible for all of us to gather in one place. The travel needs are just too... So you have a meetup for the England fans, for the Northeast United States, that you couldn't make one for the global fandom. It's impossible. Please share your thoughts on all this, and where do you think things are going to go over the next year?